and sewer pipe.
It's a relatively new mall. It was built in the 90s. So
Wow.
it doesn't have,
You can close out.
Okay.
so I felt bad for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, just because, I don't know, for what alleviates it, it makes it all moot, is that if we're not the ones having to eat the cost, that comes out of it, so it's fine, it just 400,000 with the or the point at which the other one is cheaper. So I didn't know how many.
You're live.
we have.
You're live now.
Great, welcome. This is a regular scheduled Business Economic Development Committee meeting. Today is January 22nd, 2025. It is 5:31. Councilors on the committee are Councilor Fish, Councilor Hawes, Councilor Leonard, and Councilor Mallard, and myself, Councilor Fournier. We are joined by Councilor Dean, Councilor Beck, Councilor Chair Pelletier, and Councilor Trimble. We have a lengthy agenda tonight, so let's get right to it. Also at the table is Business Economic Development Director in Creek. And
All right, thank you.
pass it to you, and you can pass it to Jose.
First item on the agenda is airport director report. Go ahead, Jose.
Thank you, Anne. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to put together another director report to kind of update you on some of the latest and greatest things that we are seeing at the airport. There's a little of a lengthier report than what I normally bring, and so I'm testing a few different things on the updates that I bring to you. So to get started, the first thing that I wanted to give you an overview is just a general operational update and some of the things that we're seeing. So along with the packet, you did receive the numbers of the November statistics for or records. We have 95% of the numbers for December, but we were just missing one more piece. If not, I would have added that to your packet. What we did see is that 2024 is going to be a record-breaking year with approximately 740,000 passengers coming through the airport, which breaks the previous record of 707. So again, continuing that trend that we've seen over the last year. And a couple highlights, that accounts for about 5% increase on our numbers.
Jose, those only the 2 months that weren't records, are those 2 months there was runway construction going on?
That's correct.
So
Yes.
other than that, those likely would have been.
And even with those disruptions that we
strong,
had,
yeah.
yeah, we still were able to break the record. And December, which is kind of the shocking month with the 22% increase from last year. So another things that you might have seen in the news, the addition of Delta Airline service over the summer to Atlanta, which again, seasonal service, but it helps us build some sort of data and at least test the service again and see how it performs. Obviously, it adds to the service that Breeze commenced operations in October. And I've looked at the numbers. Load factors are mid-high 70s. So which for a new entrant into the market, that's relatively good. We're continuing to work on, we cannot specifically promote one airline over another, but what we're doing is trying to promote all the airline destinations that are served out of Bangor, so that it bolsters again that service. In adding to the operational capacities of the airport, a couple things that have been implemented and completed over the last couple of months include the full deployment of the AeroCloud system that we came to the committee a while back to get approval. Again, this is a system that allows us to be a lot more flexible with the gates and the counters that we have in the terminal to be able to increase our capacity, better utilizing our resources. And a couple pieces of equipment that were recently added, a new shuttle bus that is up and running. It's already operating out of our new parking lot as well. So I'll go into the infrastructure in a second, but the other item that was added was a new aircraft de-icer unit, which again helps us continue to serve for traffic. Moving on to capital improvement projects. You will see here the schedule for the runway closures. So we're on to year 2 of construction. We learned a lot of really good lessons last year, and we are back fine-tuning the schedule and things that we learned from last year onto this year. This schedule has been coordinated with the Guard, with the airlines. And this time around, we do not expect any, it accounts for all the transitions that were not accounted during year 1. So we believe that this schedule is comprehensive and that will allow us to be able to get the remaining work done for this year. The terminal connector project is another pending project that has hit a couple of hiccups along the way. My hope is that by the end of the month, we'll have that project back out through the bidding process. And so we're working very closely with the FAA. We've been working very closely with them since last June. And the relationship with them has been tremendous. They've provided a significant amount of feedback over the last couple of months to try to get us to where we need to be. And again, as a reminder, that was a $12 million grant that was awarded to the airport, and that is still on the table for us to take advantage of it once we go through the rebid process. Yes.
Is that grant at all related to the bipartisan infrastructure bill? Is it part of that, or is it something separate?
It is part of it.
Okay. So I've heard that they may be pausing.
So I could address that now, or I could
Okay.
address it
Sure.
at the end with other notes that I would like to bring to the committee. It appears, so we don't have all the details exactly of what the impacts might be in terms of bill funding. It appears that it focuses on any green initiatives and particularly the use of electric vehicles. And so I'm working closely with trade associations that are monitoring the situation out of DC to provide us with the best guidance on what exactly the impacts will be on properties like ATV. Does that?
It does. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. As I mentioned already earlier, the new parking lot is open, it's in service, and it has helped significantly. I was out of the airport the day before Christmas and it was quite empty. And then on December 25th, I stopped by the airport and it was quite full, 75% full.
Wow.
So it is, the timing was perfect. And again, it's perhaps one of the fastest projects that we have completed at the airport, and allows us to use that lot in different ways. Because as you are aware, or the use of the lot kind of flip-flops during the summer, then the car rentals become our largest operation. And so we're able to easily change the use of that lot to address those needs at that time as well. So. And then a couple things have changed since the agenda was put together. The RFP for the Gate 11 replacement is out. It's been posted earlier today. And so we are excited to see that project move along. It is just for context, it's a gate that was decommissioned a couple of years back. And so we're excited to be able to bring this gate again with the deployment of some of our common use systems. Again, it allows for flexibility to be able to, for us to be able to handle international and domestic flights as well. So the project is fully funded with passenger facility charges. So that's something that it shows the use that back to the airlines on how we fund this project. Strategic initiatives. So another thing that has changed since this agenda was put together. So at that time, Dave Tilon, the manager of infrastructure and facilities, had joined that team at that time. And by earlier this week, Francis Robbins, who's here in the room, has joined the airport team as the Assistant Airport Director of Operations. So I wanted to see him in person to be able to introduce him and add him to the agenda, but he's here and we're very excited to have him on board. So with those positions, it completely solidifies the management team at the airport, which is strong. I'm looking forward to having a team to be able to continue to provide the services that we provide to the traveling public. Along the lines of strategic initiatives, last summer, the airport completed a comprehensive review of just the needs for the airport. And so we brought in a consultant that helped us get a better sense of where exactly the airport was. The last year was a difficult year in many regards for us. And so this report helped us kind of get a better sense of what was happening across the airport. And so the consultant that came in met with 9 different focus groups across the airport and spoke to about 60 employees while she was on site. It took a couple months for us to get through the report and analyzing the data and looking at exactly what the outcomes were. But finally, I was able to have several review sessions with staff. And so in 4 sessions that we held across the airport, we had 100 employees, over 100 employees participate in looking at the results of this exercise. Part of the recommendations that came from that report, we were already working on addressing. Part of them are going to be long-term solutions that we're going to need to find a little bit more of a creative way to address. But I think at least it helps us set a path forward on things that need to be addressed at the airport and how do we better prioritize some of those items. And lastly, looking ahead, one of the things that the airport had not completed in several years was a end of the year report. And so I've asked my marketing team to help us gather a lot of the data that captures really everything that we accomplished during 2024. The report is probably 80% done. So my hope is that sometime in February, I'll be able to bring the report to you. Again, capturing everything that we did during 2024. It was a busy year. We did a lot. So I believe this is a worthwhile exercise for us to capture that. And obviously, as we move forward, we're able to compare that with upcoming reports and how the airport fares year over year. Any questions so far?
Good.
Yeah. So I do have 2 items that I want to mention and that again came in over the last few days. The airport has been approached by several parties, including the Main Aeronautics Advisory Board and several managers from airports across the state for the airport to provide and testify in support of LD 138, which basically creates an exemption for airports to be able to avoid having to create basically safe spaces in terms of wildlife. And so because of the needs of the airport to take the necessary measures to address wildlife hazards, an exemption for airports would basically allow us to continue to operate in a way that we are able to take action with any wildlife threats that might be a safety hazard to the aviation industry. So it is several airports from across the state are participating based on I take the direction from the committee and the council. I just wanted to bring that to the attention if it's to get the general sense of support for it.
Councilor Trumbull.
Yeah, no, I am supportive. I thought now if you had wildlife within the fenced area, we could deal with it. So you can't deal with any wildlife?
So based on the new legislation, that would be, it would create a little bit more of a, prevent us from continuing to do that in certain cases for endangered species. Yeah. So the LD 138 would be create an exemption for airports.
Does anyone see any issue with that? I think you have a consensus then.
Thank you. And then the last thing, which kind of touches a little bit on what the chair had mentioned earlier. At the airport, we are monitoring very closely potential impacts from the federal government, particularly with the president stating intents on issuing tariffs on Canadian imports. And this is something very that we're going to track very closely, particularly because the airport, as you're aware, we issue an RFP every so many years to source our fuel. Currently, we have a contract with Irving Oil, and the fuel that the airport gets is 100% sourced from Canada. So any potential impacts on Canadian imports would likely have some impact on our operation. As the competitive process has favored Irving in terms of pricing, the fuel quality, and their ability to deliver the fuel to us. And so again, we're just monitoring whatever might come at a later point. At this time, I believe that the president has indicated that potential announcements for February 1st. So there's nothing for us to see at this time, but we'll monitor the situation.
Questions? Is there an out in our lease? Well, with our purchase agreement with Irving?
So
Should.
I will look into that, and I could bring back a report on that. I haven't gotten to that point. It's really difficult for us to assess what the impacts will be if there is any exemptions from products that might be that the tariffs might apply. So again, it's at this time it's just a general awareness that.
Right. Councilor Pelletier.
It would seem to me that there's an opportunity here for us to have a conversation with our senators and congresspeople's office to let them know about the concerns that we have, not only on the potential impact of fuel prices, but also, any dialing back of the distribution of funds from the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the impact that that could have on the airport. And I know in particular, Senator Collins has expressed in the past how important the airport is to Bangor. And so I think making them aware that we're concerned makes a lot of sense.
I'm happy to gather any information that you might deem necessary or appropriate to help any conversations that the council or the committee would like to take on those matters.
I may have seen Councilor Leonard asking something.
You put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Somebody want to read that aloud?
Yeah, what percentage of our fuel contracts are federal government as opposed to private?
50%. 50% with the Department of Defense. Which is, so the average total fuel cells that we have is about 20 million gallons annually. So about 10 million gallons are Department of Defense.
Anything else? Thank you. Look forward to seeing you again. February. All right, next up, downtown tip amendment.
Yes, this is a request to have a third amendment to the downtown TIF. Just to remind councilors, a TIF is a finance tool where you can have a portion of new taxes in a district be used for capital projects, operating, specific projects for development, if it's a TIF for a piece of property, as opposed to, in this case, an area. And it's a way to, you know, to be able to set aside those funds for that type of, capital operations plan. So in the past, your other amendments have been to add things that add projects and, other things to use those funds with. And, the statute has changed for the better to allow greater use of the TIF funds, but it has to go through the process of an amendment where you, as the city council, approves those changes, and then it has to go back to DECD for their approval. So some of the changes that we put in there are for recreation, housing, workforce development, transit services, public safety, broadband. What we did was we basically listed all of the expansion allowances that are in the statute. Ultimately, each project you would decide, you know, if you want to use TIF funds for something. But we wanted to give those options to you by expanding the allowances under the TIF.
Councilor Trumbull.
So this change would allow us, in going forward in the future, if we want to continue to fund Street Plus, we could do it if this gets approved
Yes,
through the TIF.
so it's not just the assessment
Right.
district.
Okay.
Yep. So that reduces that burden on the taxpayers.
Councilor Mallon.
Now, being new to the board, the TIF percentage is what?
Well, it's not a percentage, it's
scale
just, it's an amount above what the taxable area before the improvements were made, so it would be whatever happens above after this amendment would be able to go to these.
No,
projects.
I'm curious
It's
as
not a
to
percentage,
how you establish the amount of the TIF on a yearly basis.
it's part of, it goes through the budget process. So you
So
decide.
what
where it
basic
goes.
percentage has it been in the past 17 years or 18 years? How does it
Um,
run?
I don't have that number as a percentage, but I can get that to you.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, and as I said, I don't have commercial property, so I'm not familiar with it. If I had a commercial property worth, and the tax on it was $1,000, what would the TIF, it's an additional amount?
No, it's not an
It
additional
comes out of the
tax. It
1,000,
comes out of the 1,000.
okay.
And it's the increased in value that goes into the TIF.
Increase, that's assuming there's an increase, so if it's a decrease in value, you pay less. Goes
No,
into
you
the TIF.
still pay the same amount, but a certain
So it
amount.
never goes down, it only goes up.
Well, it's an assumption, assessed value goes up.
That's question one. Now, question two is, I noticed that we have housing listed twice.
Well,
Alternate
it's
housing and
market
housing, but they all come under housing, don't they? So why do we have it in there twice?
Because there's two types, market rate and affordable, so it's both.
But isn't it all housing? So why wouldn't it all be under the same title? I mean, I just don't like to see things broken down to the point you have to wonder I would assume a housing specialist would be responsible for all of them.
It was, and the statute is separated, market rate housing from affordable housing, so I just kept to that same nomenclature.
And what falls under homeless programs and services? What are they looking at for that?
It can be any service, services to unhoused populations that the city wants to support with TIF funds.
But I guess the problem I have is the relationship of the homeless funds to the downtown area TIF. I mean, if it's to support the downtown, are we looking at just doing the homeless in the downtown area, homeless in every area, or what? It's just a little confusing to me.
The TIF, the use of the funds for the TIF has to benefit that district. So, a literal interpretation would be, it would only be for services in the downtown. But the TIF does allow some use of the funds outside the district, as long as it's benefiting the properties that are inside the district. And again, those funds are decided on you through a budget process.
Other questions? Counselor Beck?
Just a clarification, so looking at table 1B of the cost estimates, is this just to show, hey, these are a rough idea of what we want to use that money for?
Yeah, just to kind of give some numerical projections on if the city wanted to do certain projects. These are the types of, funds that we might be looking at. You can adjust these as you go forward. These aren't
Okay.
hard and fast with DECD. They just want to see kind of like what types of things that the city would want to do.
Okay, like for affordable housing, for example, I see this as just a placeholder then, because right now we have it as
Right,
estimated
it's a
cost zero.
placeholder, right?
Okay, so once we submit this for approval, and then something comes along, we want to use it for that, we've got that in place to do
Exactly.
that. Okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Because if it's not there, you can't do it. Then it would be,
Yeah.
we'd have to go back and do the amendment again. So that's why we sort of added everything that's available to you to give you those options. It doesn't mean you have to do them.
Yeah, no, and I also appreciate in the table how it does break out the statute about why and how it's established, so
Yeah,
thank you for that.
Counselor Mal?
Of the cost estimate, how much of that has been spent if it's an ongoing project? I assume it's been reduced somewhat, or because of it being an ongoing project, we've obviously spent money for it. So if you have, like pick any of them, say park improvements at $240,000 and it's ongoing, how much has been spent to date?
I don't know. I can find out though, like how much has been spent in this fiscal year that we're in right now.
No,
out of the
this
town.
isn't just for a fiscal year, this is in total, isn't it? Or is that just a yearly?
In the annual.
So you're saying that we're looking at roughly $88 million for the year?
No, I'm sorry. That's for the life of the TIF of the district.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So I think we need to know how much was spent last year and how much was spent in the previous years. Is this a small amount or are we taking it? I mean,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
we can get you that easily.
and I noticed some of these have zeros in them. Affordable housing has a zero and so does broadband.
Again, it's a placeholder, so that if a project came up and you wanted to fund it.
We
you would
must
be
have some
able to,
idea on broadband, don't we? Or do we?
Because you have empowered yourself to be able to do it. No, well, right now it's a placeholder, broadband.
I don't think we've spent anything on broadband.
We haven't spent anything yet. Okay. But didn't I notice something in here? What's the, under the multipurpose arena at 54 million? Is that what we already have built?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
question.
So that's why we need to know how much we've spent, because it looks,
But
when you look at
so-
it and see $88 million and we've spent 2/3 of it or 3/4 of it, that makes a difference. People think differently about it because we're not spending 88 million. We've
Yeah.
already spent 2/3 of it. But-
So it'll get a lot clearer when we go through the budget process because it's broken all down
Okay,
that way.
maybe I'll
Yeah.
learn by
Yeah.
then.
Yeah,
But I can show
Right,
you like what
that's fine.
this year we've dedicated it to. Yeah,
I don't know if we have last year's,
Well, we must have a
to
running
look at.
total
Oh,
somewhere.
Of
yeah,
course.
and it's in the package.
Mhm.
I don't know if we had last year's budget.
Yeah.
That you could at least make reference to or see. Any other questions?
Just one more clarifying one. There's a couple of projects, let's say, like new parking structure, waterfront, Main Street corridor. This is no longer pursuing. Is that just there for like historical purposes to say this
Yeah.
is, okay?
All set. Good.
All right, thank you.
Community development updates, fair housing.
Robin Stanicki, our Community Development Officer, is here to give some updates on some of the projects that she's been working on.
Yeah, so I bet, do you want me to just boom, boom, do all three?
Go all three.
Okay, so we wanted to make you all aware that we're continuing our fair housing workshop series. Earlier, last year in April for Fair Housing Month, we had a workshop at the library, just gave an overview about what fair housing is, how it impacts people, just sort of like a general overview, and it was really, really popular. We had a lot of people that came, they wanted to know more, and so we built out a larger series for that, working in tandem with the local HUD office and some other housing centric agencies, including the Pine Tree Legal Assistance. So we have a small series that's going to be happening this spring. The first one is going to be on the 30th, so next Thursday. And it's going to go over the Fair Housing Act as it relates to landlord tenant law. And it's also a great way for us to talk a little bit about the Bangor tenant rights and responsibilities that we have. And we're expecting that folks will be interested from other towns because we are a little unique in that we have one and they might want to know a little bit more about that. So that will be held next Thursday at the library in the 3rd floor. All of the workshops will be in the same place, and we'll be putting out some information that shows the dates of the remaining workshops. So, and everyone is invited to attend those. These, I don't know what order these are in. The second update that we wanted to give you was regarding the funding for the Cedar Falls Mobile Home Park. We were able to get this to a point where we did hear from HUD that it is eligible, it is an allowable activity. Exactly how to maneuver and go about that. We spoke not only with HUD in the regional sense, so on the federal side, but we also spoke with the DECD. They also manage a small portfolio of CDBG funding. They, concurred with us that this was an eligible activity. Like, it's only the second one that's been done in the state, so it's really still quite novel. And so we felt pretty strongly that we could move forward with this if you all decide that we should. As I mentioned at our previous meeting, it was thought that we could use some CDBG funding, but also supplement it with the ARPA appropriation that went for the Quality Housing Provider Program. And in that way, try to balance that so that there's a little bit of forgiveness baked in and kind of lessening the burden on the residents for the full financing package that they're going to be getting. So I recommend a specific structure, deferring all payments for 10 years while they sort out the other loans and financing that they have. They'll have an initial payment. When that drops off, they can work on the CDBG portion, and at that time we can forgive the ARPA portion of that, and to consider this as a 0 interest loan, so it doesn't accrue any interest for the life of it. So what would need to happen is once we've received all of the income documentation from the residents and everything like that is complete, we'll go ahead and we'll be able to close the loan and get their funds by their closing. So what we'd like to do is, pending your decision today, move that over to the full council for approval so that it's ready to go. Does anyone have any questions?
Councilor Miller.
I have a question because it's difficult to approve something if you don't see the whole financial background. I'd like to see a little bit more of how much they're borrowing, where it's coming from and whatnot, before I bless it.
Well, I believe they're getting a loan from Bangor
No, yeah,
Savings Bank
but
and some
I
other.
wanna see it written down. I don't wanna just have you tell,
Oh,
it's not that I don't
have-
believe you, but
Right,
I like to see it in writing.
okay,
We can get that information
Yeah,
we'll do
Yeah.
that.
from Cedar Falls. Yep.
Is there a timing issue with this?
They're, they're.
You wanna close by
closed
the
on
14th?
And we can still have that on my agenda. right?
Mhm.
I know they have received commitments from Genesis Fund.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure, but I don't know that, and I don't expect you to be the one that's gonna carry the ball if doesn't happen. And I
So-
just wanna see what I'm approving before I approve it. And I can't see it here. Well, that's my vision's gone bad.
Do you have a suggestion, Counselor Miller, on the format of that information that would help you?
Well, I think we need to know what they need for the total loan and how they've come up with the money to get it, and then what we're providing them.
So at the purchase price is
Yeah.
$8 million,
Yeah.
and just break it down.
Write
who's
down
providing
where
what?
the money
Get
sources
that
are.
from Cedar
Just do it
Falls.
sources.
Yeah, I
and
have
uses.
it.
It shouldn't be
Yeah,
a
I think I
difficult
had it in
thing,
the last memo,
but
but
I
I'll
think we
just
need to see
Okay,
it.
build it out a little bit more.
Counselor Dean,
As far as all residents will be owners, correct?
Correct.
And if the resident is to sell their property, then the new owner of the property would take over the deed.
Right,
You
it's
have
like
to
a
be
share.
present in the community to be
Right,
an owner.
right. Yeah,
it's kind of like a co-op.
it is, it's exactly that.
Counselor Hobbs,
So with the added information, there's still time
Yes.
to get it on our next council meeting before their meeting in February.
mhm.
for their closing.
Would we want to? Do we meet again or could
Well,
we
no, we'll
put
probably
that
have to,
new information in a
to-
pre-council workshop or
yeah, we'll have to
something?
do it at pre-council on the 3rd.
We should have a workshop time for the new information
Sure.
and still have it on the agenda, but it would be time for discussion.
Yeah.
In the workshop.
Right,
So we could have a special BED meeting at pre-council.
I'll work with Ann on what date she'd like to, put me.
Okay.
Hey, Monday, right?
It'd have to be Monday,
Yeah, it would to me.
This
pre-council
coming
Monday,
Monday,
Yeah,
and then,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
we can do that. Perfect. Okay.
BOA,
And yes, and so VOA is the last memo that I have here. Last year, we were working with them on a project to develop a parcel out on Vizsla Ave. They were relocating their clients from 113 and 115 Center Street to new buildings out there, and they were going to use HUD 811 funding, which is permanent supportive housing funding, which is it's pretty competitive. So I think they didn't make this coming round, and so they're going to table that project, and they'd like to use the balance of their funding to make some upgrades and do some repairs at the Center Street properties. So we require that this comes back to council because it's a new address and really the scope of the project for those funds would change.
questions, Counselor Pelletier?
I have a couple of questions on this. So are people currently living in the buildings at 113 and 115?
They are,
So this is not net new housing.
correct.
This is not
Not
new
new
units.
housing.
But it's my understanding that in order to make this transition to the new property on what, Ohio Street,
It's off of Ohio Street. It's like off of Shepherd.
they need to rehab the existing place in order for them to be able to move over eventually when they get that financing.
Right.
So it's not,
So,
you're right, it's not new, not yet,
sure.
but it's coming.
So I guess the follow-on question is what would happen then to the units at 113, 115 Center Street? Are they going to stay with BOA? Would they be trying to sell them?
Initially, we were trying to get to a point where maybe they were going to give them over as set aside units for the city. So that, you know, public health would be able to use those for affordable housing. That could still be the case, but in either case, those units really need some structural repairs and some things like that. To house either their clients or Section 8 clients.
Other questions? Councilor Malley?
I'm still simple-minded. I need to follow the money. Where's the money coming from to do the rehab? It's coming from what they were going to spend on. Okay, so if they do the project over off Ohio Street, they're going to have to raise more money. Is that what you're telling me?
Right, they would have used.
So I
this
need to see
award,
that
so.
spelled out. I don't like just, you know, it's coming from here to do this. I want to see it specifically what's going on because, you know, I have issues with people coming and asking for money for a project and then in the middle of the project changing their mind and doing something different. I mean, they should have realized if they didn't realize they weren't going to get it, then hold the money and wait till you do get it to do something else. They knew these other houses weren't habitable, but we have people living in them now. Something doesn't ring true here. I'm a little confused.
Well, one of the things that the council could consider in this specifically is that this is CDBG funding, which has a timeliness component. So we can't just hold on to the money for years because we've been out of compliance with actually, you know, using the money on housing projects. So it is, it's been my goal to try to make sure that we're spending those funds in a timely manner and holding on to these funds for as long as we have has been a great thing for them to know that that's part of the funding stack, but it would be more in compliance with HUD's rules that we try to reprogram the funds for something that's going to happen in a shorter term.
Question. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the point I'm trying to make is if they went out for the 315,000 or whatever, it doesn't matter what the amount was, and they now have not been able to acquire additional monies to do the project, then I would have thought that we would have had it written in that if they didn't complete that by a certain date, the money would go back so we could issue it to someone else who was going to be doing a project in housing. I don't like this. In the middle, we change horses and we ride off in a different, that is very confusing. Seems to me if we made the commitment, I don't have an issue with it. If they can't complete the commitment, then they turn the money back and we'll give it to it. We'll let other people apply for it. It does not seem fair to say, okay, you made a mistake and you can't get your funding, so we're gonna go around the back door and hold it for you or give you something else. I don't like that. I don't think that's being upfront with the public.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at in the future using sort of the reverter clause type of thing that we do with development agreements.
It just does not, this doesn't make good sense to me.
What is
Councilor
the,
Pelletier?
thank you. What is the deadline by which these particular funds must be expended?
These particular funds, they don't have a deadline on being expended at this time because we've worked really hard to try to expend some of our overages. So we're not sort of like under the microscope with respect to this particular project. I only, you know, that other comment was really, you know, based on, you know, that was a 2023 award and, you know, we've kind of held on to it in the budget from year to year. And we just want to make sure that we're, yes, I mean, we are holding on to it here. So it's not, we haven't actually issued the funds to that recipient. But if we divest the award, we would then need to find another project to put that toward, for which this is sort of that suggestion, I guess is. maybe a different way of putting it.
Councilor Mallon.
I understand what you're saying, but you don't seem to understand. If the person that you gave the award to does not complete the agreement, then we, as a council, have an obligation to let everyone else compete for the money now. We can't just say, okay, we're gonna hold this aside for you if you get it next time. Or we're gonna give it to you to do another project. That's not fair. We've got to be open about everything, and we're not. That's like, if we give you a grant for X amount of dollars, you can spend it now, you can spend it later, you can change the project, you can do anything. I don't think that's what the intention of giving a grant is. Maybe it is, I don't know. It's not my intention.
Should I have them reapply for it? I would be here with the new application in like a week.
Right,
Or like
and this
2
project
weeks.
did come, it was before you were a counselor to the council for ARPA. So,
Right, oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
so
Yeah,
it was
this wasn't-
outlined once before. But yeah, I mean, there was an assumption made when you choose to give to an organization. If they, and that's why we brought it back to you, to be sure, are you okay if they use these funds in a different direction? So that's kind of why we're here, is to find out if you're okay with that.
And similarly to some other projects that, you know, they weren't able to use the ARPA award or whatever award in one way. How can we work with that nonprofit to make it work?
Are we talking ARPA funds or are we talking,
No,
These are
these are
CDBG funds,
just CDB?
but they had applied
I know
for
they had
ARPA,
applied,
and they-
Right. That's all
didn't-
we meant. Yeah.
So they brought it to us.
So we had before us a request for what? To use 240,000 of the CDBG money that previously we had awarded, what, 325,000, but we're switching properties.
Essentially, yeah.
Wants to rehab an existing property in order for them to get the funds needed in order to complete or start the Ohio Street property. I don't have a problem switching in the middle. I get Councilor Mallard's point. But to me, in order to facilitate what they're trying to do, I think we're just trying to do the best that we can.
Another quick question. It says, it's $240,000 for redevelopment. Are the people living there going to be able to stay there while they're rehabbing?
They will have certain parts of the project, it would be unsafe if they're doing the foundation work. They have to be off-site for that.
So, well, that brings up another question. If it's unsafe, the work needs to be done and it's unsafe now, why is code allowing people to live in the building?
It's not so unsafe that it doesn't
Not
meet
placarded.
code, it's not placarded, but it does need foundation work.
Yeah, I still think it's being unfair to other people that applied for funds to allow this group to change it, horses in the middle, and do something different. It's a different project, it's a different area. Maybe the same people being served, but I just find it not what I would want to do.
So, Councilor Beck.
Not a voting member of the committee, but just from what it sounds like to me, it just sounds like we're just rearranging steps here. So instead of building new units up front, we're just kind of putting it on the back end, doing the rehab now, adding some years of life to this badly needed housing. And then they should be able to get the funding to build the original project later.
Right, and we wouldn't be contributing additional funds on top of that for the V's lab. That's that's not part of my request. That's completely sort of off the table after you move that money.
But if I understand correctly, there's no guarantee they're going to get the loan the next time around, is there?
And if not, I guess it's
We're out
really out of
two
our
hundred and
hands.
50,000, yeah. No. I can't approve it.
So we have before us a recommendation from staff. Is there a motion?
He's typing. in chat.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
No, I can't.
Second. Wait a minute, am I on?
Councilor Hawes,
That's-
yes. We have a motion. We have a second.
Okay.
Roll call.
Yeah, I was gonna do a roll call vote. We'll start off with Councilor Fish.
Can I ask a question before I vote? It's just so I want to be clear on this. The project was approved for the funding, and before the renovations could be finished on the key goal of this property, they had to go back and make renovations here to keep the tenants, the building needed immediate repairs. So now they've had to take some of their times and money to make this property safe and do necessary improvements. And then they're gonna go back where, right, we just have a temporary stall, kind of sounds like, to fix some immediate repairs in the property that the tenants already exist in before they can move forward again and then get back on track, basically. Am I following? Because this project was also approved before I got on council, been on my life, but I just want to make sure I kind of get the history and I understand it.
Right, so the idea was that the residents that live in 113, 115 were going to move over to brand new housing. Now with that stalled, where they live now really should have those improvements, and they'd like to make those improvements. And then when they're able to get the 811 funding for Vizsla Ave, they'll move on independently for that project. Right, so essentially just flip-flopping the project rather than us supporting 113, 115 at a later date, we could support that now.
So,
Wait a second, we have a vote. You know, you gotta do the vote.
So yes, I approve it.
Councilor Hawes,
Yes,
Councilor Leonard,
Yes.
Councilor Mallard,
no,
and I'll be a yes. That would move. That would go into council.
but I would just want a verification. There is no guarantee that we will ever be building on the Ohio Street area. Is that correct?
We wouldn't be.
No, I mean, this group, there's no guarantee that they'll ever build that. Correct?
I
There's
guess
no
that's-
guarantee on the funding. I just want to be sure. I understand what's going on.
I agree. There's no certainties in life
Right.
either, so either we move or we don't. All right. That will move and go on to council.
Yep,
Recap of land use.
planning officer Anya Collette is here to give a recap of the land use plan implementation workshops.
So as you all know, we held several neighborhood meetings in the fall and in December to talk about the land use plan implementation. And we also did several pop-up events. We went to the polls. We had staff there all day to talk to people. We were at the Sidewalk Art Festival in October. We also went to a green drinks event on last Tuesday. I did go speak at the Realtors luncheon yesterday. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from people so far. I mentioned in here, you know, we did have 2 surveys online for people to fill out. Those were just meant to be more supplemental for people who couldn't come to some of our in-person events. So we didn't receive a lot of responses to those, but we did, there were some heavy trends in those surveys that were interesting. But in general, from the in-person feedback we received, there were some key takeaways. One of those was that there was generally a desire for more mixed use development, more necessities within walking distance, grocery stores, and healthy food in particular was pointed out, cafes, parks, things like that. And we heard that a lot in the comprehensive plan engagement too. People were really interested in mixed use and also in the climate plan development as well. We have heard from people, some people do feel like there's too much focus on downtown. And it's kind of hard to know, like, if they're speaking of something in particular, whether that's investment or development or things like that, but kind of in line with that feedback, we've heard from people, this idea of having kind of nodes outside of downtown, so like villages, maybe in like the Broadway shopping area. You know, we've heard people want to have mixed use and housing in the mall area. So kind of having like, not necessarily downtowns, but, you know, village centers in these different areas of town, people are really interested in that concept. Also, we heard people want to see our older existing buildings maintained as much as possible. We've also heard that in the comprehensive plan as well. And there's also a lot of interest across the board from people in preserving and then creating more green space. And whether that's on private or public land, people are interested in both parks, but they're also interested in creating and preserving green space, parking lots and private developments and things like that. So that's really important to people. And we did hear, you know, we heard from people on both sides of the argument as far as single family versus multifamily. There were proponents of each side at these meetings. But one interesting thing that we heard from people who were more on the single family advocate side was that they did feel like if there were design standards in place, that some multifamily would be more amenable to them. And in particular, we had our draft pre-approved building plans up for people to look at and give feedback on. And they really liked one of the 3-unit designs. They felt like it would fit in really well with the current neighborhoods. So that was just some interesting feedback. There were a particular group of people in the Broadway area that had kind of a different set of concerns. They're mostly concerned about traffic and the environmental impacts of development, which makes sense because there is such intense development in that area. So those are really high concerns for them. There was surprisingly some support for eliminating parking minimums and raising building height. You know, and that again kind of aligns with what we heard in the comprehensive plan process. As far as the surveys go, it was really interesting to see some very strong agreement that people felt streets, when they're reconstructed or constructed, that they should accommodate all users, so pedestrians and bicyclists, and as well as drivers. And they were also mostly on board with requiring bike parking for new development, which has been up for discussion in the new code. And then also very interesting was that a lot of people were in agreement that homes should be allowed to be built on smaller lots in the urban areas, so smaller than the 5,000 square foot minimum. And there was some disagreement though on whether the city should allow more development by right. You know, we have conditional uses that are more discretionary versus the permitted by right ones. So that was interesting. And then both in the technical, we had the technical online survey for people more in the development field, and then the survey for more the general public. In both of those surveys, people were kind of mixed, trending towards disagreeing that our current zoning really encourages or allows for a variety of commercial development and supports small businesses, which was interesting to hear. And also kind of trending towards disagreement that our residential zoning districts allow for a variety of housing types at different price points. So that gives us, you know, some feedback to work on. Let's see. And also, especially in the technical survey, people felt that our current code works better for the rural areas of the city rather than urban, which kind of makes sense because when the code was last overhauled, it was in the 90s. And that was kind of the planning trends at the time, was a little more sprawl oriented, and now things are turning in a different direction of, you know, encouraging more density and things like that. So let's see. We did also, you know, when we were talking to people about the land use plan, we also wanted to talk about complete streets and street safety, because that was also something that's been pointed out a lot in the climate action plan as well as the comprehensive plan is really encouraging multimodal transportation. And we had a ton of feedback from people on very specific improvements that could be made to different roads and different neighborhoods all over the place. In general, we heard a lot more about Union Street and Ohio Street, some particular safety concerns there. And a lot of traffic calming ideas, speed tables and flashing crosswalk lights and things like that. Just in general, people want to see better maintenance of sidewalks and more contiguous sidewalks. Because in some places we have gaps on like Stillwater Avenue. And then there were just some other some feedback we received outside of the land use code and complete streets that were more along the lines of just needing more opportunities for apprenticeships, trades training, industry training, and different ideas for businesses. We heard people wanted to see more lower priced grocers. Market basket was one idea, but kind of along the lines of that too, we heard, again, people feel like in some of the lower income areas of the city, they lack access to healthy food, which was interesting. So food security was definitely something we heard. I didn't get the chance to implement the Green Drakes feedback in here, but it pretty much aligned with what we heard in the neighborhood meetings and at our pop-up events. But that group was a little more focused on the multimodal transportation, encouraging bike lanes and things like that. And also one interesting thing was, so we had these activities at each meeting. So you could either kind of create your own development. And for that, we used cutouts of the pre-approved building plans. So people could put those on like a vacant lot. And then, so, you had a mixture of multi-units and you had accessory dwelling units and garage apartments. And then for another activity, we had maps of different areas of the city and different building types. And that included mixed commercial residential and then also apartment buildings and things like that. And so people could put those on the map and then they could also put sticky notes with their feedback. It was kind of interesting to see for the development project, creating your own development. Every time somebody would do it, they would always put a mixture of multifamily and single family and they would kind of cluster it together. And people definitely did that activity a lot more at Green Drinks, but we saw people doing that at the meetings too. So I just thought that was really interesting. But that was the gist of it. I know it was a lot, but let me know if you have questions.
Councilor Fish.
When you did the workshops and the questionnaires, how did you market or advertise to get people to participate? And how many people participated in each category? And was it what you expected? And the reason I ask this is I've heard often, I know you heard at the Realtor meeting yesterday, and Realtors are out and about a lot and feel through the selling of property and going to meetings with their clients. They just, as you heard yesterday, how do we know? We don't know about these things. So I'm just curious. I think somehow we have to improve our communication with our residents. I know there's social media, but I know it seems to be what I've heard consistently since I've gotten on council is the public really doesn't seem to know, I say go to the website, but they don't generally tend to do that.
Yeah, it's really hard. I've tried, throughout the comprehensive plan and all these other things that we've done, I've tried to find new and innovative ways to get the word out. And for this, at the polls and then at the Sidewalk Art Festival, we had this big poster with all the neighborhood meeting dates, and we were trying to let people know about it there. We did do a news story. I did a radio story. We did push it on socials, but we also did a press release. Coffee news. We did an advertisement in the coffee news. We have an email list that we keep for outreach and I spread that out to everybody. And it just seems like often in spite of that, you really still don't get the people that the number of people you want. But I will say, sorry, I will just note, we got quite a number of people at our downtown meeting. And then the green drinks event, there were tons of people at the polls, tons of people at those pop-up events. I find are the most successful way to get a lot of feedback. So,
Good, thank you.
yeah.
Counselor Dean.
Is it possible to use the local news or is that only after the fact reporting on?
Yeah, I did. I did do a story with them before the meetings. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of interest in it at the time, but I did do at least one news story to broadcast the meetings. So, yeah.
Yeah, our press releases go to all the news stations as well as.
Okay.
But goes
Just
to all
depends on
the-
when you're listening.
Yeah, so if they want to do a story. And I find that's effective. I've had people come to meetings and we'll ask them, how'd you know about this meeting? And they'll say, oh, I saw it in the news. So I do find that to be effective, but you can send the press release, but it's up to them if they want to do a story.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the downside.
Counselor Mallard.
Do we use much personal contact for the news? Do we call them or do we have a relationship or are we working?
Yep.
on-
David Warren, makes those contacts. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would, and maybe I'm out of, we shouldn't be mentioning it, but this would appear to be, what we're looking at is the 15-minute city program.
You could call it that. It's called a number of things, complete neighborhoods and things of that nature. It's just kind of a best practice nowadays and.
But
development.
it seems like we're contradicting and when we say we want to see more green space and we want to reduce the size of the lot that they can build on. So that's,
In the more urbanized areas. Yeah.
Yeah, but
well, I guess you have to define urbanized.
we still have impervious surface maximums.
Yes, I know.
Still a minimum amount of green space and we could look at making that more restrictive. So we still require a certain amount.
Now, the plans you have had done, what's the cost on these buildings? Do we know yet?
We met with the architect today just to go over some of the code issues, just making sure our code office take a look at all of those plans. We can do sort of this moment in time of what it might cost, but there's so many variables with that I really caution, doing that because you could have different finishes, different things in the house or in the unit that would drive up or down a price.
Well, do we have a basic materials list?
Yes, that'll be part of the package is materials. Yeah.
Because I didn't remember seeing one anytime.
Yeah, because those were just sketches. I didn't want them to hardline and go into those detailing of the plans until they had been reviewed by, planning board, historic preservation, this group. So that's what they're doing now.
Yeah. Counselor Leonard.
People stand down.
Can't talk, okay.
All right, sorry. Anything else? Counselor Beck.
More than, I guess, just some praise, really. I've been to a neighborhood meeting, I've been to the Outside Work Art Sale, I've been to the Green Drinks event. And, planning and land use is probably not people's most exciting thing to talk about. And even if you advertise it all over the place, I think just interest in general is gonna be down just because of the topic. But having brought my kids, having seen it, one thing I really appreciate is how much of a community feel comes to these meetings. They, the reminder that this is our Bangor, this is, for all of us. And it was interesting to engage in the conversation, but also, especially at the Green Drinks event, it just how engaged people were. So I just thought that was great. And I like the idea that you're meeting people where they're at. And I think that that's going to continue to be great.
Yeah.
And I think the success of those pop-up events shows maybe we need to lean into those more rather than having our own organized events. Not that we don't do those at all, but
Yeah.
I think the pop-up events are really successful.
Great, thanks. Anything else?
Not a question, just comment. This is really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, to Councillor Mallard's point, the question is how do you take all of these disparate ideas and put them together in a way that it works for everybody? But certainly very interesting feedback to take into the next year. Thank you.
Definitely.
Okay,
Good mind.
Yeah, annual reports.
Annual reports.
Okay.
Okay,
Do you want to walk through the planning board, historic preservation, and Pensacola?
sure. So planning board had a fairly busy year. They approved 182 units of housing and over 150,000 square feet of commercial floor area, which I think the previous year was 100,000 square feet less than that. So that was quite a lot last year. As usual, it seems like every year, most of their time is dedicated to zone changes and then ordinance text amendments. And then they also did revise their planning board bylaws. And then, of course, we began the land development code update. Just some of the major land development code changes we made were adopting the new use of co-living dormitory, reducing off-street parking minimums for residential dwellings, and allowing manufactured homes where single-family homes are allowed. Those were some of the highlights. As far as the Historic Preservation Commission, a large portion of the applications they got were along the Broadway area. Most of what they do is typically certificates of appropriateness, which is really major changes, somewhat major within the historic districts. The other thing that they review is changes in the facade district or the revitalization area. They don't see those quite as much. They did also, as you reviewed tonight, we're starting the 2024, phase 4 architectural survey. So since Artifacts has been approved for that, we'll be starting that project soon. But we received the grant for that last year. And then also, this project was primarily spearheaded by one of the commissioners because he works at the University of Maine, but starting a public history project for improving the interpretive signage along the Kenduskeag Trail. And then also, one historic site was designated last year at Hasey's main stages on Broadway. And then we did also complete phase 3 of the architectural survey. As far as the Penjajawat Commission, they reviewed and issued recommendations for 2 land development applications in the overlay zone. They also did meet with the land development code consultants as well to give feedback on the current code. And they did meet with stormwater staff to discuss the Penjajawat watershed-based management plan. So,
Great. Any questions for planning, historic, or for Judge Award? Thank you.
okay.
Thank you, Anya. And the other annual report is the Cultural Commission. As you know, for the last, I forget how many years now, they have been awarding grants for different art events around the city. And so there's 2 times of the year that they get awarded, once in the spring and then once in the fall. So that takes up a lot of commission time to review those and make recommendations. Ultimately, you as council approve those recommendations. And then they also work on October, and there is a cultural asset subcommittee that is trying to sort of connect where all of our cultural assets are, you know, with our GIS. And so they've been working on that. They also are working on, as directed by you, doing a request for proposals for art on the restrooms. So that's moving forward, and they'll be making recommendations on that too sometime in the spring.
Questions? Comments? Good, thank you. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes here. That's great, thank you. Anything else?
No, lots for the agenda next time. We're working on, you know, from the council goal setting. We've been working at a staff level on a work plan to propose to you for getting you to your goals. So,
Great.
yeah.
Anything for staff? Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Thank you.